Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. The fever pitch is growing for the college football playoffs. And that's why I brought in Dr. Bill Bender to join me on this Tim May podcast. We're only days away from Ohio State taking on Georgia. Oh, yeah, and there's another game, Michigan taking on Texas Christian. But I digress. Bottom line is Bill Bender from the Sporting News, one of my favorite people all time. Welcome back to the Tim May podcast, my man.
Hey, thanks for having me on. What a week we're going to have with these two college football playoff semifinals. I'm excited about it. I'm sure you guys are. Happy to be on here as always, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, by the time this thing, by the time this podcast drops, I'll already be in Atlanta. You will be perusing the scene from well above, just keeping up with both games, et cetera, and the interesting tidbits are going to come out before those games and definitely after those games. But Bill, I just wanted to get a feel from you. And by the way, I have a short little interview coming up with JT Tuimoloau that I did when Ohio State had a little bit of a media day a week or so ago, and basically talking about how he, in that interim week between Ohio State losing to Michigan and then finding out it is in the college football playoff, how he went out on like a Tuesday practice, noticed everybody's Dauber was down. Dauber, I like using that word every chance I get, and basically kind of made an impassioned, impromptu speech to the players there that kind of got them going. And I know you were there when we were talking to him and others about that, but we'll get to that in a moment. But I just wanted to whet people's appetite about what's coming, because, you got to get guys jacked up when you got to get them jacked up. But man, the proof's going to be in the pudding on Saturday night. In the Mercedes-Benz Dome there in Atlanta, right? And I'm just wondering, as you move into the final week of this thing, what's just jumping out at you about, for example, Ohio State and its chances?
Well, I mean, what jumped out at me at that media day that I was at with you and several other, the entire Buckeye beat there, is it seemed like the questioning was equal parts looking back at the Michigan game and then looking forward to this opportunity with Georgia, and then looking to the future of a possible Michigan rematch. So I think that's where Ohio State's psyche has to be in the present tense. And I think JT was there. I have all the interviews I sat in, he was one that there was cliches coming out. Obviously, we've got to play Buckeye football, those kind of things. But he seemed very focused on present tense and the challenge that awaits with Georgia. And this is a beast that they're going to be facing down in Atlanta. They don't give up a lot of sacks. They're very sound defensively. They're going to be a tough challenge for the Buckeyes. And I think the second life thing comes into work. But again, to me, it's forget about the Michigan game. That's over. The fans need to forget about the Michigan game. It's over. You're in the college football playoff. There's so many things Ohio State could rewrite. What happened November 26th would be in the past if they can go out and do that over the next two games.
Let me interrupt you real quick, though. Don't you think it's the media that just kind of keeps bringing it up? Because that the last thing these guys want to hear about, I'm talking about Ohio State players and coaches, is what went wrong in the last game you played. Because how many times can you explain it? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you got your butt kicked. Now you have new life, and your ultimate goal for the season is right in front of you, right? And man, what a roadblock between you and that ultimate goal, the defending national champion. It's undefeated and ranked number one in the country. And, of course the players are going to hang their heads about what happened against Michigan, but the flip side of it is they want to be focused on what's in front of them, right? I mean, that's the sense I got from it.
Yeah, I thought C.J. Stroud got a little agitated with that line of questioning about the past. It happened. And you can overanalyze 5 plays, which seem to come up quite a bit. Those 5 big plays. Well, the way I've looked, you can't say Michigan didn't do anything other than those 5 plays, because those 5 plays were about 250 yards and 5 touchdowns.
355.
350. Is that what the running total was? Okay,
yeah, so it was crazy, brother. You were there. It was crazy.
Forget about it. Forget about
it.
That's got to be the challenge for Ryan Day. Forget about that noise. You've got a chance to go take out the champion. And Steel Chambers had a good interview as well. I mean, obviously, being a Georgia kid, it's going to mean more to him. I thought he was very upfront. I liked I pictured myself being 19 to 22 and, these guys talking about watching the USC game, and they have new life. And when you have as much talent as Ohio State does, if they truly do play loose and free, they're a dangerous team. If they go into that game uptight and worried about what happened a month ago, they're going to get stomped again. So I think that's where you have to be from the psyche standpoint is go out, let it rip, see what happens against a really talented Georgia team.
Yeah. And here's the thing that you have to know as a football team when you go into a game like this. I use a lot of boxing analogies, of course, and airplane analogies. And I appreciate you being in that co-pilot seat again with me this week, because I appreciate the smoothness with which you fly this plane when I turn it over to you. But the boxing analogy is getting hit in the mouth. Georgia's going to hit these guys in the mouth. Ohio State's got to turn back, reciprocate, and or hit them in the mouth first, and because this is a big time heavyweight fight, kind of contrasting styles again, but styles make fights, man. As the late J.D. McCauley, a trainer for Buster Douglas, said before he fought Mike Tyson, styles make fights and make interesting fights. And, everybody wants to call Georgia like Michigan on steroids, so to speak. I mean, I think that's overstating it from the standpoint of using the term steroids, but Michigan heavy, let's put it that way. And Ohio State, the plan it had for Michigan, for whatever reason, did not work, as you well know. Forget about what the defense gave up in that game. The offense scored 3 points in the second half. And you've got to be willing to go in and throw haymakers in a game like this, right? Especially if you're Ohio State with this elite passing attack. As much as you want to run the ball probably down their throat to show you're a man, you want to throw the ball over their heads to show that you can. And I think that's the challenge for Ryan Day and his offensive staff is to don't forget about just, basically hitting these guys in the mouth with the run game and trying to throw haymakers with the passing game. What do you think about that?
Yeah, very interesting. The offensive attack, they will have to be able to run the ball. And Mayan Williams should be healthier. Obviously Travion's out. Maybe they get Dallin Hayden a little bit more involved, but they have to be able to run a little bit because you can't just go out there and say, we're going to throw. What I think is going to happen offensively is where LSU, I get that LSU had a ton of passing yards. Where Ohio State's going to have to be effective against them earlier in the game is in that 10 to 20 yard box intermediate passing game, getting the ball out quick to Meka Egbuka, getting the ball out quick to Harrison, see what happens and move the chains that way, and then be aggressive from there. And I think if they follow that pattern, they can have some success. Defensively, I'm going to take it back one time to the Michigan game because I rewatched that game.
Sure.
The 3rd and 9, I think it was 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, where they hit Cornelius Johnson on the first big play. The entire game shifted after that. Like I really believe that after watching that, because then the Michigan knew they could hit a big play. It was one missed tackle, literally set that game that way. So if it happens against Georgia, and it might, you might miss a tackle and Brock Bowers might run 50 yards for a touchdown. They have to just forget it and press reset because Georgia's going to make some big plays. So many comparisons to the Alabama game in 14, Tim. I'm not feeling it as much because I just think these are two different teams. That Alabama team almost schemed their way out of that game because they wouldn't give the ball to Derrick Henry.
Yeah. That's a clinic unto itself. The second quarter of that game when Alabama could have taken control and decided it wanted to be not just ground and pound. Lane Kiffin was the offensive coordinator then, but decided also wanted to throw the ball with, in my opinion, a mediocre quarterback. And then, of course, the play right before halftime when Evan Spencer hit Michael Thomas, that great throw, but also great catch, that option pass from Evan Spencer to Michael Thomas, toe tap. That changed everything too. But you're right. Where you like in this game is Georgia. Well, Georgia's not even as big a favorite as Alabama was going into that game, and a lot of people are scratching their head about Ohio State because they know that wasn't Ohio State's best game against Michigan. They know that 3 of those touchdowns were basically screw-ups in one form or fashion by Ohio State, but screw-ups can happen at any moment, right? When you press a team into the corner, they got to throw the ball to move it. Well, you're going from trying to run against a brick wall to throwing it where fewer people are. And that's what I always liken it to is why not throw the ball against Ohio State? Number one, teams have shown that they can get big plays out of it. And number two, Ohio State's pretty good against the run. But you need to take a call there?
No, I just my daughter walked downstairs. I'm like, I'm on this call. This call is important.
Yeah.
No, we're all good. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think those are the things that I'm watching. You were in a lot of the scrums with me talking about the Georgia tight ends, and
Yes.
we asked to a man the Ohio State um, guys that were available, particularly on defense. They're all impressed with Stetson Bennett, and we can joke about his age all you want.
Yeah.
Every quarterback has a different journey.
Yeah.
He's good, and he's good in big games. And if you take it back to the playoff last year against Michigan, and then against Alabama, and then against Oregon in the opener, and against Tennessee, he's been lights out. So I really think that's a key too. Interested to see what JT said to you, but how does Ohio State get pressure on a guy that hasn't taken a sack in 6 games?
Yeah. And number two, the reason he hadn't taken a sack in 6 games, number one, he gets pretty good protection. But number two, like J.J. McCarthy, he has enough get up and go to get up and go. And what really hurt Ohio State, like you said in that Michigan game, if you want to go back, the lessons learned, the big plays happened. But letting J.J. McCarthy escape for some of those runs to keep drives alive, that's what you can't afford in these games. Now, you're going to give up a few of those because I think he's adept at it. Stetson Bennett, I think he's very underrated in that regard of keeping drives alive. I mean, go back and watch that Missouri game again when they're behind in the fourth quarter, but he made some plays, both running and throwing. And also they got their running game cranked up. I'm talking about Georgia. Georgia had its close moments this year too against Kentucky. Defensively against Kent State, they had some problems with wide plays, et cetera, about guys breaking things. So Georgia,
and Missouri hit him, Tim. Not to interrupt.
Yeah.
Missouri hit him. Missouri was the one team I thought got a little pass rush on him.
Yes.
And so when you have a talented group like JT, like Sawyer, interior pressure, if they can get it, I want to see that. That would be the momentum maker to me.
Yes.
Is if early in the game, Ohio State gets a sack, gets a turnover, shows that they can, how would Georgia adjust to that? I mean, there's sometimes, like you use the boxing analogies, if you haven't got hit in 6 fights, how are you going to respond when you finally get hit?
Body blows.
Jim Knowles, I'd dial up the pressure early, and vice versa. Stroud hasn't got hit a lot.
Yeah.
He didn't get hit a lot in the Michigan game, really. I mean, they didn't. So how did they respond? Because Georgia, I know they're coming.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have a challenge on the interior with Jalen Carter. You're going to have a challenge on the edge. And I don't know about you, but if there's one individual matchup, and we talked about it at Media Day, that I want to see more than anything else, it's Marvin Harrison. I don't know how many times it'll happen. Kaylee Ringo.
Yeah.
Those are 2 Sunday guys. Those are 2 really good, talented players. How many times one-on-one? How many times are you going to be in man on them? I want to see it.
Yeah. And you know what? You can turn on that Missouri game, for example. You can see Ringo getting beat a few times. You can see him also pass interfering, I think, in that game in a key moment. I mean, every football player is fallible in some form or fashion. You don't let necessarily one man take you out of your offense. And as I pointed out, to people talked a lot. I know I wrote a little story about going into the Penn State game about who's the kid for the cornerback for who?
Joey Porter?
Yeah, Joey Porter Jr. versus Marvin Harrison Jr. And going into that game. And the point is, they matched up some, but they didn't match up all day. You know what I mean? I mean, it was like depending on formations, et cetera. And that'll be the way it'll be with Ringo. But boy, yeah, there will be scouts in the stands just watching that all day and every day. But you don't forget about Marvin Harrison Jr. in that regard, in my opinion, because he's still, I think he's the best receiver in the country. And you got to lean on, these are where your best players have really got to step up, including JT Tuimoloau. I mean, he proved in that Penn State game he could take over a game. That right tackle at Penn State, I'm not sure we'll ever hear his name mentioned in the NFL draft. Maybe. But the way JT Tuimoloau played in that game. But hey, real quick, let's get to my little brief little interview with him about what compelled him to talk to that team, but also what he sees going into this game and the challenge that Ohio State faces. Here's a quick little snippet, ladies and gentlemen, with JT Tuimoloau, Ohio State's talented sophomore defensive end.
JT Tuimoloau, thanks for joining the Tim May podcast. It's going to be on my Tim May podcast. There comes a moment in every player's life where you either put up or shut up. You know what I mean? And you kind of had that moment here in practice a couple of weeks ago when you reminded the players, hey, there's something to play for here. Let's have an intense practice. Let's get after it. Let's get out of this doldrums, right? And what compelled you to do that?
God's grace. I mean, telling everybody, I really think God is real, and God is out there. All you gotta do is just trust in Him. And I feel like He put this in place in my plan, and I was very hesitant. I that's really stepping out my comfort zone. I might be loud on the field, but when it comes to speaking in front of crowds and stuff like that, it was it was very different. But the way I thought about it, it's this is my second family, it's my extended family, and I love these guys and I love these boys, and just felt like, hey, God granted me with this opportunity, I got to take it.
Yeah, it's like in a family. You can sense when people are down or whatever. It's somebody's got to step in and lift them up, right? I mean, how long have you? I mean, I would think you've done that before. In the past. When do you remember first stepping up and just saying maybe the right thing at the right time?
It's probably my high school years. Just telling the boys like, hey, it's just another game. We just gotta go out there and stay together. And I think here is just it was only me, but being around these guys for a long time, I've noticed what they do and how they motivate me, and just seeing how we were. I just felt like, hey, I know how you guys are, and I know where we are as one, and hey, we got to snap out of it, and be together and hold each other accountable.
Yeah, and let's put this in perspective. When you did that, Utah had not beaten USC yet. I mean, it was like post Michigan, the old hangover from the Michigan game and stuff. Because there is a certain joy, I would think, about playing with your quote brothers and just playing football, right?
Yeah.
Is that where it comes from? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I have fun playing out there. Being alongside with Mike, Teron, and Rocket in the back. Having everybody out there, everyone. All 11 dudes and more. This is I was telling them, like, hey, this wasn't about me. Like, I want to make sure, you guys go out with a bang, and I give you all my all. And, I just want to let them know, like, hey, I need y'all. As long as y'all been around me, you guys been motivating me, and, I need y'all, and I got y'all backs.
Hey, one last thing. You guys all year long are in the top 2, top 3 of the country and stuff. One loss, and now everybody's seen all your flaws. Yeah, they know all your pimples, your blemishes. You know what I mean? I mean, as a team and stuff. Do you feel like, is there a sense that y'all have something to prove in this game, or is it a sense that you've got new life to keep playing the way you think y'all are capable?
Yeah.
It's kind of a double-edged question there.
I think it's both. We just, in the locker room, we always talk about what we need to do better as a team. We got to, best thing is self-evaluating.
Yeah.
It's tough, but you gotta be real with yourself, and I feel like that was what we needed to do. Being there and just have those tough talks with each other, and just continue to grow and continue to get better.
It's funny. Thinking of JT Tuimoloau standing up in front of the team and making some kind of impassioned play, as you could tell from that interview, Bill, and you've been around him. Sort of a quiet kind of guy, but man, there's a confidence there. I think he exudes confidence about just what he's all about, right? I mean, you've picked up on that too, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, some guys are, you'd be around the game of football long enough. Some guys are loud, and he's not that guy. So it's almost like when somebody like him speaks up, the whole team's going to they'll have their attention. You know what I mean? Like the quiet ones, I don't picture him as a guy at practice that is barking all the time and yelling, and, but you watch him on the field, there's definitely a nastiness about him. And again, I just think he's one of those players, along with Zach Harrison, healthy. This better than I do. Hall should be healthy, correct?
Well, that's what they're. He said he thinks he's as healthy as he's been all year. So
he was
that was a week ago.
Yeah, he was a game wrecker against Notre Dame. Sawyer,
yes.
They've got to get. You cannot let Stetson Bennett just sit back there and wait on hitting the tight ends, wait on hitting a underrated playmaker that they have in Ladd McConkey.
Yeah.
When you watch him, he's another Sunday guy. He's going to play. I don't know that he'll be like a 1,500-yard guy by any means, but he'll play because of his route running, and they run some reverses with him. And you mentioned the running game. Georgia uses 3 different guys, like Ohio State has used 3 different guys. There's not a dominant back, but if they get up by like 7 to 10 points, they would be content to do what they did against Tennessee and just
Yes.
turn and hand it off. So Ohio State can't get in that situation either.
Yeah. And Kirby Smart, I mean, he understands, just like Ryan Day does. Dude, this is not a beauty contest at 8:00 on December the 31st. This is getting the W and moving on, and whatever that takes, and however you feel good about it. But I'm just curious about this thing, though. Like you just pointed out, I mean, Jalen Carter kind of got banged up as the season went on. I'm talking about Georgia's extremely talented and fearsome defensive tackle. This is a lot of this is going to be about guys being healthy too, and how healthy are they, right, Bill? Like you just pointed out, Mike Hall, what a difference he brings when he's just teeing off, and we didn't get to see that a lot this year. Teron Vincent really came on, I think, as this year went on, became a presence inside, but Mike Hall just has an undeniable first step, which can disrupt a lot of stuff you're trying to do on offense, right?
Yeah, and again, against Notre Dame, that was very apparent. I mean, he was the story after the game. He was one of the guys that Jerry brought in to the press conference because he can be that guy. And, you look, whenever you talk about games like this, you look for the unsung hero or the guy that's probably not getting written about a lot. He could be one. You go, I always keep drawing back to that Alabama game. It was Steve Miller was the guy that had the huge play.
Pick six, drops into zone coverage.
Ohio State fans will know who he is forever because of that play. So it could be him. It could be somebody else. One thing that I also think is not getting talked about a lot. I had a story this week I talked to Gary Stoken, the Peach Bowl president. I know he was available with Ohio State media earlier too.
Yeah. I had him on my podcast a couple of weeks ago.
This isn't a road game. It is, but it's not. I get that it's in Georgia, but Ohio State's going to have a lot of fans there.
Yes,
they travel like that. They haven't. I find it curious. They've never played in the state of Georgia, which is amazing to me, given that they've only played the one time. And I mean, it is a road game, but it's not to me.
Yeah.
Just because there's going to be enough Ohio State presence there. I'd say, if I had to guess, 60-40, 55-45 Georgia. It's not going to be that big of a deal.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, this is how old I am. I covered the only other game Ohio State and Georgia have ever played, the 1992 season, the Citrus Bowl, Garrison Hurst for Georgia running back versus Robert Smith and Ohio State, and turned out to be a one touchdown game. I don't know how much bowl games are referendums, but the bottom line is really interesting that those teams had never played before and haven't played since until now. And two of the great college football programs going back in all time in the nation. And just the historic nature of this matchup is interesting to me. But then
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So can I ask you a question then?
Yeah.
How much stock do you take in Ohio State's? Obviously, I think they're 2-11 against SEC teams in bowl games.
Yeah.
Do you take any stock in that? Because when you covered that game, I believe that was a stretch when they lost to Tennessee one year.
It was later. They lost to Alabama and Tennessee back to back in the Citrus Bowl in 94 and 95 seasons. You know what I mean?
Do you take any stock in it?
No, because every team is different. And that was just like going into that, I'll give you two examples. If you're paying attention, and I know you do, 2002 when Ohio State played Miami for the national championship, everybody was talking about Miami speed, Miami this, Miami that. Miami was going for the two-peat. Is that what you call it? Two-peat? Repeat? I call it the two-peat. And everybody was talking about Ohio State, didn't. And I'm just going, number one, what are you looking at? Because if you look at Ohio State's defense that year with Matt Wilhelm and Mike Dawson and all these other guys, I mean, guys that were Will Smith, right on down the line, guys that you knew were going to play on Sundays eventually and be really good at it, which they were. How do you say Ohio State? I picked Ohio State that year because of its defense. And I thought it would do enough offensively like it had been doing all that year. Remember 2002? What a crazy season. Right. And then 2014, everybody was talking about, again, bringing up the SEC jinx against Ohio State in the Big Ten, but mainly Ohio State, because Ohio State had helped foist that stupid thing starting in 2006 when they were number one team in the country. They won the game of the century and then went to the Fiesta Bowl to play Florida for the national championship. Florida coached by Urban Meyer, and clearly spent a lot of time at the In-N-Out Burger drive-through that week. But then On top of that, on the opening kickoff, Ted Ginn Jr., the fastest man on the field, not just on Ohio State, returns it for a touchdown. Roy Hall comes up to congratulate him in the end zone. You know this whole thing. Kind of like ends up tackling him, rolls Ted Ginn Jr.'s ankle, and boom, Ted Ginn Jr.'s gone for the rest of the game. And matter of fact, that was his last game at Ohio State. And you're going, what? You know, the point is, Ohio State had shown, yeah, it has speed to play with these guys. And then boom, he's gone. I think he got beat 41-14. But I remembered asking Urban the next day. I said, Urban, because I didn't get to go to his press conference, because you always are focused on Ohio State when you're covering them. I said, what do you think losing Ted Ginn Jr. meant to this offense in Ohio State? And he goes, well, imagine us if we'd lost Percy Harvin on the first play. Exactly the same thing. You had all these things planned. Now you had to go to plan B, C, D, and E, you know? I mean, Trestle Ball even went out the window at one point in that game, which was crazy. But 2014, Ohio State's what, a 13-point underdog or whatever it was going against Alabama. And everybody saying Ohio State had no chance. I'm looking around at Ohio State's roster, looking at these guys rising like Joey Bosa, Michael Thomas. You've got the quarterback dance going on, but Cardale Jones had proven himself, right? And in that game against Wisconsin, and plus Cardale Jones, what I'm getting to, I'm roundabout getting to this point I'm going to make. But the point was, Ohio State had the players to play with Alabama, but you had to know it was going to be a heavyweight, 12-round fight or 4-quarter fight. And I keep reminding people that as great as Ohio State played in that second half, Alabama was throwing to the end zone on the last play to maybe have a chance to tie the game. You know what I mean? And Tyvis Powell gets that interception. Well, here's what I'm getting to. Cardale Jones did what it took in that game, whether it was running or throwing, to win that game. C.J. Stroud has to take exactly the same approach in a game of this magnitude, right? The two quarterbacks, as much as we want to talk about all this other stuff, the two quarterbacks, this is profound.
This is a huge,
are the linchpins here on whether you have a shot at winning these games. Go ahead.
Well, you asked CJ about legacy, and I wrote a little bit about it after.
Yeah, you did. Good story. I'm writing about that too. I'm trying to put space between yours and mine, so it looks like
I thought you had a good line of questioning, because to me, it's like, this is the whole deal. It's like, he is the guy that was the first guy to shake the Heisman winner's hand the last 2 years.
Yeah.
He's put up these numbers. There's this narrative around him that so much is tied to that Michigan game. And I understand that. Like, I do. Listen, grew up in Central Ohio. I in that story I wrote, Troy Smith 3-0 against Ohio State. It's almost like
against Michigan. Yeah.
Against Michigan.
Yeah.
No, he's not 3-0 against Ohio State. 3-0 against Michigan. Chad Henne 0-4 against Ohio State. My point is, I think you and I could probably, if you name a quarterback the last 50 years, we probably know their record in the game. Yeah. I probably don't know some of the 80s guys. You do. I know you do. But it's like I made the point. It's like Tom Brady was 1-1 against Ohio State. It's nobody's talking about that now. But your legacy as a college football player is tied to that game. He knows that. He understands that. So what's the legacy on Stroud if he goes out and wins these next two?
Well, that's the point. See, back then, Troy Smith beat Michigan for the third time, 2006, wins the Heisman Trophy. And then they lay an egg in the Fiesta Bowl for all kinds of reasons, but it was a hen and it laid an egg. 41-14. Maybe Troy Smith's legacy was a little. See, my point is, what is legacy? How do you even define it? It is literally a subjective thing. In my opinion, being a Heisman Trophy finalist 2 years in a row means not only are you pretty good, but a lot of other people who watch college football think you're pretty damn good. Being basically the player of the year, for want of another term, in the Big Ten 2 years in a row, being the quarterback of the year two years in a row in the Big Ten, the only 2 years you played, says a lot about what other people think about you already, despite some really, 2 tough losses, right? I mean, really. Well,
and then
three losses when you take into account, the Oregon game. But
and then I was saying, like, okay, your legacy's this, but to me, I know all those guys, but I also know this. I know the last 3 Ohio State quarterbacks to win a national title.
Yeah,
I know
of course
Cardale with JT Barrett. It was Craig Krenzel. And then it was Lancaster's own Rex Kern. I know that. I grew up listening. Rex I've had a chance to talk to him. He's in my hometown. He is it. He's the legend. And I think when you bring up Rex Kern in my hometown of Lancaster, it comes up, yeah, he was really good with the Gales, but first bout within 5 seconds, national champion, best Ohio State team ever, whatever, then you get into those discussions. And that's a discussion for you, like whether they were. But if CJ Stroud joins that club and then he goes to the NFL and they somehow beat Michigan in a rematch, like this is that whole thing that we were talking about at the top about me just being like, that's the past, that's the future. I mean, the challenge in the present tense is more than enough. That you can't be worried about maize and blue, Michigan, all that stuff, because in front of you, that Georgia G is going to be a big challenge for them.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Stetson Bennett proved in that national championship game last year. He ran the ball when it really needed to be run. When you look back to Craig Krenzel in 2002, dude, he took a hit from Jonathan Vilma at the goal line. And I still feel, I just got goosebumps bringing that up, that I still feel today for him. I mean, because he was willing to, not willing, he just did what it took to win. You know what I mean? And then Cardale Jones, some of those hits he took in that Alabama game when he was biggest, he ended up going from avoiding the pass rush to now being the biggest man on the field of anybody trying to tackle him. You know what I mean? You remember all that against Alabama. And of course, against Oregon, he made some big mistakes in that Oregon game, but still made plays when it counted. This is all about making plays when it counts. And you're exactly right about CJ. Nothing's going to like change my point of view on him as a person and as a quarterback. And I think he's one of the great quarterbacks who's ever played the game in the Big Ten and at Ohio State. But it's the laurels that come with taking your team to a championship, because whether it's fair or not, it's always tied to you and your head coach, right? And it is what it is at this point. And Stetson Bennett has been there, done that. A guy that Georgia tried to almost run off, right? 2 or 3 times in his career. How many guys have come and gone in that quarterback room at Georgia, and he stuck around and he ended up being the guy?
That's so funny you say that. Last year, this time, coming off beating Michigan in a playoff game, there were still Georgia fans going into the Alabama rematch that wanted JT Daniels to play.
Yes.
And start in that game. And then, what's Bennett do? He goes out. He was good in that game. He was very good. He made the plays when he needed to. He wasn't like off the charts dominant. And I don't think he'll be a guy that he'll probably be a backup in the NFL for most of his career, I would guess. I mean, I don't want to. Yeah, he probably will. And but nobody, when you end a drought that goes back to 1980, like again, Stetson Bennett's part of that club.
Yeah,
in the Herschel Walker conversation of Georgia legends, in terms of football, and definitely going to be there the rest of his life. And then I don't want to say if he wins another one, because Alabama's the last team to go back to back. No team in the playoff era has gone back to back. That's only going to increase his legend even more.
I agree 100%. And here's the thing about him. They got beat by Alabama in that SEC championship game last year, but then they came back and had their second shot. Bottom line is, man, you watch games. Go back and watch the Missouri game from this year when they needed a pass on the money, in clutch time. When they needed it on the money in clutch time against Alabama in that national championship game last year, Stetson Bennett put it on the money. Reminds me a lot of Craig Krenzel, because Craig Krenzel, I thought Ohio State should have thrown the ball a lot more when he was there. But man, when they needed a throw, did he deliver in that 2002 season? I think you agree with me on that. I won't go into chapter and verse on that, and because I think most Ohio State fans remember that's what you're looking for in a quarterback. Dan Marino, how many national championships he win? How many Super Bowls he win? Zippo, But you're looking, as that's the late Hayden Fry would have put it. But the bottom line is you're just looking for that guy that makes plays when it matters, is heady enough to read defenses when it matters, et cetera. And that's Stetson Bennett, and that's pretty much been C.J. Stroud. But you've got to get some help, from the guys on the other end. And he put a couple other passes either on or near the money in that Michigan game that would have changed some things. They weren't called, but it all falls on his shoulders. He throws for over 300 yards, but they scored 3 points in the second half. They bogged down in the red zone. Georgia, that's where Georgia is really good defensively too. Did Ohio State get some things figured out in the red zone, right? I mean, it always comes back one form or fashion to the quarterback making a play with his arm or occasionally with his feet to keep things going. And that's what Stetson Bennett has proven he can do. Will C.J. Stroud step up to that challenge, right?
Right. I mean, that's definitely where I'm pulling this up right now. We had our preview this week. There was a stat I wanted to tell you. Let's give me 2 seconds.
I'm good, man.
Yeah, you said that, like, so with it, the other part will be under pressure. And you look at Pro Football Focus, and I was talking about how these guys, in a clean pocket, CJ Stroud 71.2%. If he's under pressure, it goes down to about 40.6. And the same numbers with Stetson Bennett. If the pocket's clean, we're 72.9. The pocket's not, it's 41.9. Now, some of that is, it's under pressure, but man, if you can get there and then get home, I think sacks in this game on third down, like, hear me out on this, a sack on third down is going to feel like a turnover.
Gold. It's got to feel like gold.
Right, because if you can get one and get a turnover, and then, obviously Ohio State's going to want to get as many possessions as possible, not get bogged down in the red zone, like you said, make the play that, Michigan, and that, bringing it up again, but Mike Sanders still made a heck of a play in the red zone.
Yeah.
Like, they got to finish the touchdowns there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and Georgia's same deal. So if it comes down to a field goal game, that's not good for either side. But I'm really looking, like, in-game trends, and there's always one or two I try to keep an eye on. One is which one of these teams can get some pressure. You do not want to see, if you're an Ohio State fan, Jalen Carter holding CJ Stroud up with one arm like this and with a one in the other. That would be a bad sign if that's happening early in the game.
Yeah, boy, what a moment that was. Hey, real quick, and what you're getting, the thing that's left out of a stat like that is how many times were these two guys really under pressure? You know what I mean? Because their offensive lines are pretty damn good. Both of these teams, agreed?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you don't know. I don't really, I would have to go back and watch for like the third or fourth time, but Michigan didn't really hit CJ Stroud a lot. I think they were almost daring him to run on the other end. And then Georgia, I've watched enough of Stetson, like you said, the Krenzel comparison is actually really, really good, Tim. That's why you do what you do. That's a great comparison because he does slither out of the pocket a little bit. And when they need a big play, he makes it.
Yeah.
And if it's 3rd and 13 and they're coming off a holding call and something like that happens, can JT finish that sack? Can Jack Sawyer finish that sack? Can they make a special teams play? Ohio State's going to need a lot to go right to win this game. Make no mistake about it. But it's not like if it happens, I'm not going to be super surprised because of all the talent that I see on the field.
Yeah, and I'll just leave you with this thought. My thought is, I don't see this as David versus Goliath. I see this as Goliath versus maybe Goliath Jr. You know what I mean? Meaning these two teams are a little bit different, but in their own way, they've been quite impressive this year on both sides of the ball on occasion. What hurt Ohio State was giving up those huge plays, but also giving up, like I said, those little cuts by 1,000 scrambles, you know what I mean, by J.J. McCarthy, who kind of just had a game, and I keep bringing this quote up because it really stuck with me. Watching Jim Harbaugh in that Michigan Ohio State press conference on Monday before the game, where what was his instruction? What would be his instruction to J.J. McCarthy? His instruction, he said, would be have at it, play quarterback, play your game. There comes a time when the quarterback has to just forget about the play that was called sometimes. Zero in, but basically play free, man. Do what you feel it takes from one snap to the next to take your team to the promised land. And that would be my instruction to CJ Stroud. And it was definitely that instruction to Stetson Bennett against Alabama last year in the championship game, against LSU in the SEC championship. Remember they got up in that game and then kind of like just sort of like status quo, right? And LSU lost its starting quarterback, and then that Nussmeier kid came in, threw some balls down the field, and sort of got LSU back into it. But LSU made so many mistakes in that game, it was crazy. The blueprint is there for Ohio State to be able to move the ball and have some success, but you just can't have those huge problems. You can't have those huge mistakes, the turnovers, but definitely the penalties, which is, plagued Ohio State against Michigan, right? There's a lot involved, and it's not just on the quarterback, but the quarterback is expected to clean it all up in the final analysis, right?
Yeah, for sure. And they talked a lot about good on good. That's what this game is. It's not. Yeah, it's definitely not. David, Ohio State's an underdog, but it's less than a touchdown. And
exactly.
These are two programs, and it's funny. I've said this for like 3 years, since probably the COVID year even. maybe even 2019, for the last 4 years, you could safely say, and you wouldn't get in too much trouble if you said, in the last 4 years, Ohio State's pretty much had the best offense in college football over a 4-year period.
Yeah.
Points, yards, Heisman finalists, All-Americans. Last 4 years, Georgia's probably had the best defense.
Yeah.
And that's what
good.
I love about it. You're getting that matchup finally. I wanted to see it in 20 when Fields was out there. I wanted to see it last year. I thought, leading up to the playoff that Ohio State, man, Georgia had 15 NFL guys on that defense or whatever. I wanted to see the Ohio State. I wanted to see Olave and Wilson go up against, well, they still had Ringo. And then on the other side, they had, Smith and all these good corners that they had.
Yes.
So we get to see it. And we should enjoy it. It's New Year's Eve. I think, as Stoken told us, the ratings are going to be off the charts. Probably be the second most watched. It'll be the most watched semifinal since Alabama, Ohio State, no question. So I think people should go out and enjoy it. Like I said, I've said it about 4 times on this podcast, present tense. Maybe that's just from coaching youth basketball. We try to stay in the present tense at all times and not look ahead, not look behind. And if you do that, it'll be fun.
Yeah, exactly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate once again Bill Bender jumping into the co-pilot seat of the Tim May podcast. And Bill, you brought it once again. And here we go. We didn't even talk about the other semi, and I won't get into it now. Who do you see winning each game and why? We'll start with Michigan versus Texas Christian University, TCU, aka TCU, in the Fiesta Bowl. Who do you see winning that game? And why?
Well, I think TCU is not given much of a chance, and that's always dangerous. I mean, and we've seen this with Ohio State in the past as well. I mean, when you play Big 12, Big 10, they don't play each other a lot. So to me, it's just which style wins out. Is Max Duggan able to be a factor in the running game, make some big plays, make Michigan uncomfortable, take them out of their game plan, or is Michigan just going to do what they did the last 2 games and, well, you have a game plan. That's great. We're going to hammer you with the run. We're going to make some big plays, and McCarthy's going to play well. McCarthy's brilliant the last 2 games. So I think it's tight at halftime. Michigan pulls away in the second half like they've done, and they do their thing and they win. Am I off?
No, you sound good.
No, I mean, am I off in terms of my prediction?
No, I was going.
I said you.
No, I meant. Well, that's what I meant. You sound good. I mean, that sounds about the way I see it. The only X factor here is Max Duggan. Just don't call him late for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. I just think this guy, man, boy, comes a time when a guy can just make plays, and TCU forgot about that. Yeah, in that Big 12 championship game when they got down there in overtime and forgot Max Duggan had gotten them there and run the ball 2 times on 3rd and 4th down with their running back and get stuffed. Wow, that was a huge mistake. You let your quarterback have the ball in his hands in that regard, especially the guy that's gotten you there. Alabama, quickly, Ohio State versus Georgia. Yeah. I don't know why I said Alabama. Just, it's a slip of the tongue.
I'm not going to get kicked off your podcast, but I picked Georgia. I mean, this is 30. I picked 33-28, which is under the spread, which comes with a story, and I've laid it out this way. I absolutely believe Ohio State can win this game, though. I picked Georgia because it's kind of like the built-in Alabama thing.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, so I remember in 2014, I was just starting to come on with a sporting news and starting to really get into college football for us, even though I've been there for 15 years. But I picked Alabama to beat Ohio State by a similar score. It was very similar. It was my first year helping. And I just remember the avalanche of text and emails from Ohio State fans. You were wrong. You doubted us. I was like, the whole time I was saying they're going to cover. It's going to be close. So don't come in my inbox. I do think they can hang. I absolutely won't be surprised if they win, but I think it's the safer pick to pick Georgia. I do have Ohio State covering. I know that's not going to make everybody feel better, but I got it at 33-28 Georgia.
Yeah, but you're like me. I think points are going to be scored in this game, man. I see both teams getting up into the 30s, maybe pushing that 40 line. I mean, because this is when you let it all hang out. Like I said, throw haymakers and see which ones land, right? Because one haymaker can change a fight. And I see it sort of similar to you, but I see Ohio State somehow or another making a play or two, which makes a difference, something they did not do against Michigan. And that doesn't mean that you can't make plays. This is a team bristling with with weapons. And I'm just curious, like you, to see what's going to end up how they're going to end up playing at the running back deal with how healthy Mayan Williams is going to be. Chip Trainum, they lean on him big time. Dallin Hayden kind of forgot about him in that Michigan game, but what a difference he was in that Maryland game. And then a guy that, was thrown into the mix the other day when we were talking to Ryan Day, Xavier Johnson. He can play running back or receiver. How they're going to mix him in, just show something a little bit different. I just see Ohio State being able, for some reason or other, it's got in my gut that they're going to make a play or two, which makes a difference in the fourth quarter in this game. So Bill Bender, man.
38-30. So just real quick, and then you can cut me off. If it's 38-35, if you tell me right now, like the final score is 41-38, I would say Ohio State won.
Yeah. Well,
so if you're thinking if it's going to get high 30s, Tim, then I see why your prediction is the way it is.
I just see the possibilities that you got to make plays against Georgia. Georgia's given up some big plays this year, but hadn't given up a bunch of them. Obviously, the games I mentioned, the other teams didn't get out of the 20s, I don't think, in that game. Obviously Kentucky scored 6. So this is a real freaking defense. But every defense has its Achilles, and the Achilles is, if you can get one-on-one matchups with Marvin Harrison Jr., and I'm saying against anybody, you got a shot. If you can get them with Emeka Egbuka, you've got a shot. Julian Fleming, right on down the line, and somebody else may step up from that receiver core. It's going to be interesting to watch as the game goes on. But I just think Ohio State has A, B, C, whereas a lot of these teams Georgia played this year had A, maybe B, but not C, including Tennessee. Tennessee had Jalen Hyatt and Hendon Hooker, and they had a couple other guys that were decent. But, boy, you take those two guys and keep them from killing you with a big play, you got something going on there. And South Carolina proved that as well as anybody. So that's what I'm just saying. I just think this is where Ohio State's depth offensively should come to bear if they can protect, like you said, not let Jalen Carter wreck everything. That's just the way I feel. But anyway, we got a week to go, basically, or 5 days to go before that game. Bill, I know you're on pins and needles, because I love big-time football games, don't you?
I am, and I'm excited. 9th year of the college football playoff. Honored to be doing it for Sporting News. Honored that, I think over the 9 years, got to come on your show a lot more.
Yeah.
So I hope you have a good time down there. Hopefully I'll see you in LA. That's what I told Jerry. So maybe I'll see you in LA. That'd be great.
So
your Hollywood thing isn't ready for Tim May. We know that.
Yeah. Always make a point to drive through there, though, just in case, and crank up the volume. But anyway, that's another story for another day, maybe next week. But ladies and gentlemen, I really always truly appreciate Bill Bender of the Sporting News. Not only does he come across well, but he thinks things out, unlike yours truly sometimes. And that's what I appreciate him. And Bill, happy holidays, my man. Looking forward to seeing you next week. We especially if Ohio State wins, you and I will do we'll do a curtain call here. You know what I mean? But ladies and gentlemen, until next week, this is Tim May for Bill Bender. We'll see you then.